多少汗水砌成一道墙，
多少苦心聚成一个家。这里是温暖明亮，
阳光眷恋的地方。
一个人一点微薄力量，一条心圆了遥远梦想。
多经历就能点亮多难的愿望，让我们像一家人一样
来分享感动，化解迷惘，用最温柔的目光
看彼此成长，张开臂膀，
打开门窗，
让爱照在心上。也许你我故事不一样，
却都在这被爱被疗伤。这里是谈心歌唱，
阳光眷恋的地方。
一个人一点微薄力量，一条心圆了遥远梦想。
多经历就能点亮多难的愿望，
让我们像一家人一样，来分享感动，化解迷惘，用最温柔的目光看彼此成长。张开臂膀，打开门窗，让爱照在心上。巴拉巴拉巴拉巴拉巴拉巴拉，哈啦啦巴拉巴拉，嘣嘣巴拉巴拉巴拉巴拉巴拉，巴拉巴拉巴。让我们像一家人一样，来分享感动，化解迷惘，用最温柔的目光看彼此成长。张开臂膀，打开门窗，让爱照在心上。
多少汗水砌成一道墙，
多少苦心聚成一个家。这里是温暖明亮，
阳光眷恋的地方。
一个人一点微薄力量，一条心圆了遥远梦想。
多经 也许你我故事不一样，
却都在这被爱被疗伤。
这里是谈心合唱，阳光眷恋的地方。
一个人一点微薄力量，
一条心圆了，遥远梦想，同心里就能点亮多难的愿望。
让我们像一家人一样，来分享感动化解迷惘，用最温柔的目光看彼此成长。敞开臂膀，打开门窗，让爱照在心上。
So before we begin, we'd like to invite our moderator and all our distinguished panelists to join us on stage. We invite Vincent Shen to introduce the panelists for this session and set the tone for our discussion. Let's welcome them with a warm round of applause.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. 大家好，大家好。这个我知道最后一场了，所以大家有点。
Good afternoon. I know this is the final session of the day. You are probably feeling a little bit tired, but I'm sure you are still filled with joy. I actually didn't want to serve as a moderator. I would rather think of myself as a stakeholder so that we can all be equal parties to this dialogue. And for this session, our panelists are all my good friends.
Let me introduce the very distinguished professor, Mr. Professor Caroline Flammer, the Barton Hampton Professor of Economics of Columbia. She served the Vice Dean for the Research and Faculty Affairs at the Columbia School, CPA. She also is a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research, a research fellow at the Center for the Economic Policy Research, and a research member at the European Corporate Governance Institute. She has received numerous honors and awards for her work. I especially like this one. She got a Greening Finance Prize from Oxford, my school, for the outstanding research. And she is named by the Web of Science among the top 100 highly cited research in economics and business over the late decade. So let's welcome Professor Caroline Vermeer. Thank you.
Oh.
That's one by one, yes.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation and kind introduction. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you. So I will kick us off with a very brief overview of blended finance, introduction to blended finance, I would say. If you think about it, we're in the midst of multiple challenges: climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequality, poverty, you name it. Now, these challenges are deeply intertwined with each other, as you may know. Like climate change is deeply intertwined with biodiversity loss, with poverty. If we don't address climate change, biodiversity loss, this may lead to also food insecurity, worsen poverty, may lead to forced migration, etc., etc. Now, the typical way we've been trying to think about how to mitigate these challenges is through intergovernmental measures, such as the Convention on Biological Diversity and other global treaties, as well as governmental measures, such as the regulation of the quantity of public good or the regulation of the price of the public good. So think about, for example, the establishment of protected areas, technology standards. By the way, I don't think the slides are up. Apologies.
We might need help here. Can somebody help?
Meanwhile,
I can just talk.
you just talk? Okay.
Just talk.
I know you can. Please.
I know how to talk. All right, so let me just do it without the slides. Bear with me, okay? I'm happy to share the slides later on. But so just to, again, we're in the midst of multiple challenges, and the typical way we've been thinking about is to mitigate these grand societal challenges is through intergovernmental measures and governmental measures, such as the regulation of price and the regulation of quantity. For example, well-known methods are the establishment of protected areas, the development of technological standards, cap and trade programs, or when it comes to price, for example, through tax incentives and subsidies. Now, what we also know is that while it would be basically first best if the governments were to regulate, unfortunately, these kind of measures are very difficult to implement. And so then the question is, what can we do to further, doesn't move, to further, what can we do? Is there anything else we could do? So again, intergovernmental measures and governmental measures are very difficult to implement. Is there anything we can do? And so one potential solution is the role of blended finance. Okay? Now, in terms of when you then look at funding, how have we been typically financing the mitigation of grand societal challenges, it's primarily through development funding and philanthropic funding. Yet, we face an enormous financing gap. And the key question becomes, how can we close this financing gap to finance innovative solutions, be it in climate tech, renewable energy, nature-based solutions, social innovations, etc., especially in the global south, where we need the capital the most. And so this is where blended finance comes in. And the idea of blended finance is essentially that, oh, it's up, okay, but it doesn't move in sync. So the idea of blended finance is that the pooling together of public capital, so development funding and philanthropic funding, helps to subsidize and de-risk private capital investment. And so there are different tools available to help de-risk private capital investment. And this includes, for example, at the fund level, there are different de-risking mechanisms such as seniority, preferred rate of returns, financial guarantees. So we heard earlier today about first loss guarantees, which are really very important. Then at the project level, there are additional de-risking mechanisms that can be used, such as the provision of concessional funding, ex-ante risk mitigation mechanisms. So think about, for example, farming, where non-profit organizations helps to engage with the local farmers and helps to teach them how to engage in sustainable agricultural practices or sustainable fishing practices. So somebody will have to pay that non-profit organization to actually provide that service and educate, correct? But now by teaching the local farmers how to actually improve the sustainable agricultural practices, it helps improve the probability of business success. Basically, an ex-ante risk mitigation mechanisms, it's in a way similar to prototyping or just like helping to educate and train, again, so that the project is more likely to succeed financially at the end of the day. In addition to ex-ante risk mitigation mechanisms, there are ex-post risk mitigation mechanisms, such as, for example, financial guarantees, such as first loss guarantees and risk insurance. So this is essentially, these are mechanisms that can put in place if there is flooding, if there is a disaster, wildfire or whatever it is. In those unlikely cases that this happens and, for example, destroys the harvest of the farmers, then these kind of risk mitigation mechanisms take place. Obviously, putting these risk mitigation mechanisms in place helps de-risk the investment of private capital investment. Now, investors not only care about the risk, but also the returns. And so in terms of financial return, or in terms of returns, okay, next. Okay, perfect. Okay, so in terms of returns, investors will care about the direct financial returns that they achieve by investing into these projects. Be it, for example, investing into sustainable tea farming or sustainable fishing practices, correct? So there is a monetization mechanisms in place, for example, by investing in sustainable coffee farming or tea farming. It helps improve the soil quality. It helps improve the quality of the harvest, potentially the quantity of the harvest, which allows the farmers to achieve a higher price at the market, especially if the produce is certified as eco-friendly produced. In addition, the investors will also care about the potential indirect financial returns that they may gain through, for example, carbon credits or biodiversity credits. As I mentioned before, the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are deeply intertwined. And so essentially, by investing into green projects, it may allow investors actually to also obtain carbon or biodiversity credits. Now, investors, regardless of whether these are traditional investors and absolutely do not care about the societal impact that they have, they will care about the indirect and the direct financial returns that they may achieve with their investments. In addition, impact investors or sustainable investors, they will also care about the impact return they can achieve because they invest into the public good, into the goodness of the economy. Okay? In all to say that blended finance vehicles may actually even be attractive to traditional investors. We are not talking about just impact investors, but also, for example, public pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and big institutional investors. They may actually be interested ultimately to invest there. But many of them don't yet invest into blended finance projects. And one of the potential reasons is because they feel like the perceived risk is too high. And so this is where these de-risking mechanisms kick in that I mentioned before. And this is just, next. This figure, this is probably way too small for you to see, but it just illustrates how such a fund can be structured. So you have a general partner, then you have limited partners, senior LPs as well as junior LPs. Junior LPs might actually be where foundations come in, where development finance institutions come in, where governments can come in with providing subsidies. And then senior LPs, these would be then more moving towards impact investors, traditional investors, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, etc. And then they invest into different projects that can be de-risked through ex ante and ex post de-risking mechanisms. Okay. Now, what is important, and we already heard a little bit about it in an earlier session today, is that the public funding, scarce resources, be it development funding or also philanthropic funding, is used efficiently, correct? So we have limited foundational funding out there, we have limited development funding out there, and so it is very important that this funding is used and invested into in a meaningful way and doesn't crowd out private capital. So in other words, it should basically, to really maximize the sustainable development impact that we as a world may be able to achieve, we want to be very careful of who invests where and with whom, etc. And so obviously, next, please. Obviously, the reallocation of risks. So for example, if you as a foundation or impact investor come in and are willing to provide concessional funding, be it as a grant or be it as program-aligned investment where you allow for below-market returns, basically you help subsidize and de-risk the investment of other investors, correct? So this may actually raise very important questions and challenges in your own minds, like, do you really want to help those other guys? But another way of seeing it is, if, for example, you're a foundation, in order to really maximize your own impact that you really want to achieve, it may help you to team up with the others and provide that, for example, first loss guarantee to help crowd in other capital. So in order to most efficiently use blended finance vehicles, there are several conditions that need to be fulfilled or ideally are fulfilled. And this is, on one hand, you only want to provide the funding if you can provide non-financial additionality, meaning if your investments lead to positive impact. So if your investments basically lead to an improvement in goodness in the economy that would otherwise not be achieved. Relatedly, you may only want to provide the funding if there is market failure, meaning if you were not to invest, other investors would not invest into it. So there would basically be, private capital wouldn't come in unless you help subsidize it and provide, for example, the first loss guarantee. So I think there's many opportunities here to really collaborate with each other. Different capital providers collaborate with each other in order to really achieve the objectives that each one of them wants to achieve. And what is also clear from several conversations is that there is a lack of understanding about blended finance, how to ideally structure this. There is a lot of opportunity for conversation, for dialogue, bringing together different capital providers, as I like to say, so from foundations to family offices, to high net worth individuals, all the way to pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. And the question is, how can we pool together this capital to really close the financing gaps, especially in the global south, where we need the money the most in order to mitigate climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequality, poverty, etc. And for this, we need way much more research and education. And I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Caroline. So I want to introduce my second good friend, Kexing Lin. Kexing is the partner in the PwC corporate tax team. She is specializing in the corporate tax advisory and is a part of the entrepreneurial and the private business practice, providing integrated business solution to the entrepreneurs, business family, and investor, with a particular focus on Singapore-Indonesia corridor. Kexing is the first alumni to be appointed on the Singapore Management University's Board of Trustees by the Ministry of Education. That's amazing. Senior member of the Global Family Office Circle and a faculty member at the Wealth Management Institute. Please share something to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And I think most importantly, a friend of Vincent as well as Tzu Chi. Thank you very much for having me today. Let me come to the slide.
So, sorry, apologies for the PPT. When you need to go to the next slide,
Oh, we can
please just
queue,
say
is it?
next.
We can
Yeah.
queue for the
Thank
slides.
you.
Okay, no problem. That's why we need friends, right, to help flow this through. So let me start. Really, my role today is not so much to talk about myself as a tax advisor, but really sharing a bit about, I guess, as a consultant in the market, really working together this number of years with like business families, family offices, next gens, as well as owner founders. What is some of Singapore's journey as part of this and how we are working together with economies like Taiwan, Greater China, Southeast Asia, and many of the investors all around the world. If we go to the next slide, right, I wanted to share a bit of my journey coming as we project through. The next slide, if we can cue for the next slide. Okay, if not, I'm just going to speak, right? So basically, I've kind of grown up with the PwC world, and this is my year 20. Time flies, right, when you are doing interesting and fun stuff. I started my career working with corporate clients and then later financial institution clients. And I remember one day going to my bosses and saying, hey, you know what? I would really love to do something with more purpose, more impact. And they were talking about then we have this concept called the owner's agenda, where we said we like to follow the humans. Because at the end of the day, humans are the start of many things about the good, about society, about progress. And the idea was then that if we were to follow the journeys of these type of business families as they go into succession, transition, growth, divestment, we will be able to actually look at opportunities to create impact, to be able to actually see where are their transitions, and you see between the wheel that is for ownership and wealth, as well as the wheel for business, there are lots of opportunities in which we have what we call the current generation, and there are many as well in Taiwan or the Greater Asia region, what we call the next generation, which might be the upcoming. And actually in the firm, we have a term called the now generation, the one where the next gen have come into position, starting to find their own way. And as they are looking for many of this purpose, I think they are looking beyond just pure growth. They are looking for purpose. They are looking for much more than really a financial discussion these days. And as we grow into this journey, right, on the next slide, we speak a little bit about purposeful capital. So, you know, Singapore as a very small little red dot, we would like to aggregate more than when Taylor Swift comes to Singapore or when Zhou Jielun comes to run a concert, right? We really would like to go beyond a pure financial center to look at how we could aggregate the amount of capital coming through Singapore's shores and going out of Singapore into all of this. You know, I teach at the Wealth Management Institute, and, you know, on the Greater China Family Office program, we kind of like to say with Professor Gao Hao at Tsinghua University that Singapore is a little bit like 钱袋子，钱进来，钱出去，其实中间流动，希望有一部分是留在新加坡。
It's kind of like a money pocket in Singapore. Money coming, come out. We hope some of the money will be left in Singapore.
True to many of the international projects, maybe half or more go into Asia Pacific, but increasingly going into the broader region, whether it is Middle East, it is EMEA, or it is US, right? Where many of these families, as well as institutional advisors, are treating Singapore as a bit of an aggregator. And as Singapore society progresses beyond just the economics, we are looking at also driving towards a more inclusive, socially driven kind of perspectives. And as we look at that, we see the opportunity, just like Caroline was saying, for transformative capital, the ability for them to play a long game. I think we were speaking earlier at the panels, they were saying that this can be very patient capital, right? I think Professor Jeffrey was speaking about that. But they can be patient for financial returns, but impatient for results as well. They would like to sift for very bespoke projects that can give them the kind of takeaways beyond just financial returns. And on the following slide, we talk a little bit about what has Singapore been doing on the next slide in terms of what is it that Singapore is trying to do. I think Singapore is trying to aggregate, first, for example, many of the global leading financial institutions. Just at COP29, Singapore has announced that last year, we had this Financing Asia Transition project that we have launched, and they are going to commit for matching capital, $500 million coming through. Temasek, our sovereign wealth fund, has committed $100 million capital for concessionary capital as we come through on the anniversary, and they are aggregating many, many players, right, across the financial institutions, insurers, funds, etc., to be able to bring their leading technology, their networks to come through and use Singapore as a platform. Now, beyond that, Singapore's AUM, as we had grown, let's say about 2016 or so, you could see about $2.7 trillion. At the end of last year, we have hit about $5.4 trillion, but we don't have a double growth in our population. We're still struggling with fertility, a little bit like Taiwan as well, and we are still looking at new opportunities for meaningful engagement. And one of the opportunities for meaningful engagement you will see as we look at the next slide, right, is beyond the licensed financial institutions, today's influential LPs, endowments, many of these are driven by ultra-high net worth families, by families who want meaning, who want purpose, by next gens who've grown up with a more broader view of the world. And Singapore's single family offices and private wealth have also grown drastically. The first time I remember my chairman was asking me to look at private wealth 10 years ago. We were knocking on every bank's door. Nobody was really setting up. In early of 2019, we had about 200 of these single-family offices. And single-family office, we mean those that represent a single linear descendant, right, of the families. And if you count one to be one family, by Q1 of this year, Singapore now has 1,650. If we let that sink in, just in a short span of less than 5 years, we've grown from 200, 400, and keep multiplying as we're coming up. And as Singapore is looking towards that journey, I think what we are looking at is not just numerical growth, but we are really looking at how to bring together the networks, the power, the wealth, the decision-making ability, right, to be visionary and channel this together with what the government is looking to put, as well as these global leading financial investors, to aggregate a platform. So there are many platforms that are coming through. They are bringing together and calling for almost national service from advisors like us. They have co-opted many of us to become faculty, to train philanthropic advisors, to be able to train who might be people, who could be talents running the family office, how they could aggregate between Southeast Asian families, Greater China, Middle Eastern, global families setting up family offices at satellite locations in Singapore to be able to create an impact. And at the end of the day, I think if I go to my concluding slide, really for this phase of it, what does Singapore want to do? I think from my own perspective as Singaporean, Singapore's always been seen as that little red dot, a 小红点, right? It was given to us as a story right beside our Indonesian neighbors who said, you're just a red dot. But we've taken that very proudly to say that, we like to be a red dot that could be an aggregator, could be a platform for collaboration, and hopefully also catalyze that next phase of growth, for that next phase of impact, so that our growth is not just in numerical numbers, but be able to say that this is our contribution to that greater good as well as to Singapore society's change. So with that, maybe I'll pass the time back to Vincent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jing. So let me introduce my third friend, best friend from Singapore, May. May Anderson is the leader and the philanthropy strategist driving the transformative impact in the real world of art, culture, and philanthropy. As the head of Philanthropy Services Asia at BNP Paribas Wealth Management, she served as a trust advisor to the private wealth client, guiding them toward the purpose-driven personal and the corporate philanthropic endeavors. Also, she is chairing the art outreach. So let me share more with that.
Thank you so much, Vincent. 大家好，刚才听到
Hello, everyone. Just now, Jeffrey Williams speaks such wonderful Chinese. That has really put me to shame because I don't speak as good Chinese as he. So I need to make my presentation in English.
job in the bank, I think. My colleague Jody, hopefully she makes money for all our clients. My job is to help them spend money for a good cause. I had an iPad and a presentation on impact investing, on innovative models of philanthropy, but I've been listening to all of you, listening to Lawrence when he started, and Lawrence talked about storytelling. And I looked at the words behind me. It says the economy of goodness, but it also, there was a word that started with catalytic. Catalytic means change, powerful, deep change. And so I've decided to change my mind and try and talk about what gives inspiration to action. Philanthropy, if you think about it, is often about doing things, right? Getting things done, like your amazing volunteers doing things. But if you want success, I think it's not just doing, it's thinking. So I want to start with what it takes to change your mindset and what we can think about when we think about philanthropy and then innovative ways of doing philanthropy. So when you're on an aircraft and you listen to the pilot or the steward and they talk about an emergency, what do they tell us? In the case of an emergency, you take care of yourself first. If there's a mask, you put it on yourself before you help anybody else. So I feel that if you really want to be a powerful agent of change, you have to start with yourself first. And what do I mean by that, right? I think I'm growing older. My clients are sometimes my age, sometimes older, sometimes younger, but they are very successful. If you think about private banking clients, they are very successful and they have a little bit of money, right? And because they are so successful and often very powerful, sometimes they are very resistant to doing things in a different way, right? So the things that, how do I get them to be open to doing things like what Caroline talked about, incredibly impressive, investments that can bring large-scale change. Before we get there, here are some of the things I tell my clients, right? The first thing I want to tell them is, just because you have $10, you don't have to spend all of it to make an impact. Let me give you a very quick story, okay? So I have a client, she's Malaysian, she makes all her money in Singapore, and she says, I want to help Singapore. All of you love to give your children tuition, 补习啊.我们华人嘛, everybody 要做好的母亲呢就要 tuition, right? But the kids that don't have tuition, who need it the most, they don't get it. So May, I want you to help me to set up a tuition agency. And I want to give tuition to these poor children. And I said, oh my gosh, right? How do we do that? You have a blank check. Go ahead and spend the money. She gave me a really big budget, very generous budget. But I worried. I worried a lot. Where I have to rent a facility, right? Find the teachers. And where do I even find the children? How do I know that they're the ones that really need tuition, right? So I said, no, wait, stop. Let's 合作嘛. Collaboration is critical. And remember, if I spend all my time spending all of my clients' money, the bank is going to fire me, right? So I also want to make sure that I don't spend all of the budget. So what I did was I suggested that we work with
a Catholic welfare agency that had 2 large organizations in Singapore, 2 large institutions, and they take care of kids who come home from school, but the parents can't afford to take care of them. So they go to these centers to eat lunch and have a bath and do their homework, and these are the children that have already been chosen, selected, means tested, right? So we work with them. But the other thing we did was to hire university undergrads as their tuition teachers. Now, these university undergrads are themselves financial aid kids. They're on scholarships and bursaries. So imagine that your first layer of impact settled, you are taking care of the children, but you want to build more layers of impact in by giving these young people, the university undergrads, a way of earning some pocket money, right? And also a way to bond with these children. So the first thing I want you to think about is, don't spend all your money, but also think about layers of impact. Layers of impact. The second thing I want to talk about is it's very close to sort of the Buddhist precept of taking away ego. You don't want to think about what I can do. This example is powerful. I loved it, and it's not mine. It was actually the Ford Foundation in China. When I spoke to their director in Beijing, they take care of 少数民族, the minority tribes. And a lot of them don't send their children to school, especially girls. They don't send the girls to school, right? They can't afford it. So the question that that Ford Foundation wanted to answer was, how do we get more kids to school, right? So they gave the children a bowl of rice in the morning. If you put a bowl of rice in the morning and a bowl of rice in the afternoon, they saw a lot more kids going to school because they are not just not educated, they are very poor. And it was very successful. Kids not only went to school, they stayed at school. But, you know, there's always criticism, right? And what did they say to Ford Foundation? The people said to Ford Foundation, you are America's Ford Foundation, you're so rich. These kids, not only do they not have enough education, they are malnourished, not nourished well. A bowl of rice is so simple. How about vegetables and protein, meat? Ford Foundation said this, we can do that. But then it will be called the Ford Foundation program, and you don't want that. You want a model where you can show the proof of concept, and then the local government can take this model and replicate it in the various villages and cities and towns, and so that you can scale the project. So again, even though you have $10, you don't have to spend all of it. And to drive change, catalytic change, you must be open to thinking about going in there, doing something, leaving the place better and getting out. So I always ask my clients, in investment, they will tell Jody, where's my money? I want my money back. Here is $10, I want $20 back. But in philanthropy, you don't ask that. You guys are always very kind. 好啊，我就捐吧. But you don't think about the return. So it's not always about financial returns, as you know, we do talk about impact investing and finance, but you got to think about not being a crutch, having to give all the time and continuously. As I come to the end of my comments, I want to leave you with one last story, okay? And it's about sustainability. And I think there's a race to be more strategic, to be more sustainable, to be more sophisticated, because we want to develop, right? But here's the story. I have a client, he came to me and said, I want your opinion. I have another philanthropy advisor, so of course it's a bit of competition, right? And I help to give food to the poor. So families that don't have enough to eat, he supports a delivery program to take food to them. He says, my advisor in the other bank says that it's not good because single-use plastic, right? All this food is in plastic bags, not sustainable. What do you think? I said, if you measure it by sustainability, it's terrible, terrible program. But let me ask you this. What is your solution? The recommendation is to get a box, a plastic Tupperware box or a thermos flask, and then you bring it and then you get the food, right? And I said, that sounds better, but philanthropy and innovation has to take into account human dignity and sensitivity. If you ask the poor families to all line up in the center of the community center, holding out an empty box to ask for food, that's not maybe the best way, you know, to serve their needs. And when volunteers go into their house, yes, there's a single-use plastic moment there, but you can see sometimes that the mother is not there, or the father is sick, or one child is sick. So in our excitement to do more and to be more sophisticated, I also try to make sure that the responsibility lies with us, Jody and I, when we talk to clients, to really take into account what they really want to achieve, as well as, what is going to make a lasting impact out there. The final thing I'll say is that, philanthropy is very fashionable now. It's very fashionable not because everybody is just suddenly a lot more generous, I hope people are, but there's more pressure on entrepreneurs, more pressure because they have to measure their businesses across the E, S, and G metrics. So they have to be more accountable. There is never a better time than now with people who are willing to do more because of their good hearts, but also having to do more because of a lot of regulator, state and industry, business pressure, shareholder pressure. So at this wonderful time, I hope you listen to what Kasim said about the enabling environment in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Singapore, and the ambition of families and individuals, and really work with us to make a change. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, May. Hello? So every time I pick up microphone, I want to sing. So I want to stop myself. Okay, I don't want to let the momentum be break. So I don't want to insist use my presentation. So I would like to sit down and direct get into the dialogue. So before we get into I hope the audience enjoy the thought of us. So before that, I just share one story of mine. I invite Caroline to visit one of my projects in Taipei, Dadaocheng. Probably many of you visit there. There's one project called the Zone Economic Sedai Group. The Sedai Group is led by an entrepreneur, Mr. Zhou. He also is my great friend. So when the COVID hit Taiwan, so everybody panicked for any kind of things. You can imagine the merchandise suffered the most because no tourism, no people hanging around the street, zero. So he faced a situation is literally zero help, no one helping. No government support, the bank loan tracing to pay them back the interest. The landlord don't know how to do. I just came back from my trip and be lucky into Taiwan and think about how should I do. So when I go through introduction, met him, and the first thing I got, my position is an angel investor, is an impact investor. So the story share with you is how I treat other people, because I will stay on the same position when I were an entrepreneur. So I not just listen to him, actually I pitch him. After he introduced his business model, I realized his sweet spot of his business. It's very difficult for people to imagine his business compared to the fashion giant, LVMH. Because I read all this business model around the world, I realize the LVMH have the major model is called the 6 pillars. You can check online. And two of them is quite matched. One is decentralization. The purpose of decentralization is empower people, like blockchain, like the most famous topic, democracy, to give people authority to run their own business, but within a structure. So the structure will generate behavior. It's quite similar, like a Tzu Chi Forum say, 做就对了, do first. But how to do? You need under the structure. There's a way to do. And another thing is the craftsmanship. LVMH have a lot of dimensions, different kind of brands. You have to let them organic growth, but create a synergy with the multiple company. So the craftsmanship is aligned with the entrepreneurship. So now you get into Dadaocheng, you enjoy this from generation to generation, their wisdom, and the young generation, their passion, their enthusiasm. So all this is combined together, become opportunity for all of us to pay attention. So I just suggest him, okay, let me in. Let me help you. So I apply the blend finance structure. I play the role as a mentor. I go to the sovereign wealth fund, and afterward, all the support come up. There's a grant, there's a professor, and afterward, there's an equity investor coming in. There's the Tong Zixian, everyone know him, the boss of Chengping, very good. So the project became very successful, and from the bottom, from the ground, and all the way to the crowd, the top down. So it's a lot of fascinating story I can share if the computer come back. Okay, so let me stop here. And I have to hand over my microphone to Kaxin to let her to help us to dive deep into the meaningful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. I thought maybe I'll start by, I wonder if I could have a show of hands in the crowd, actually. How many of you feel like you understand blended finance? If you think yes, could I have a show of hands? Wow. Half hands will count too. 2 halves will make a full one. I thought I wanted to start with that, right? Because perhaps it's also a little bit of level set. And we were chatting over dinner. When we come to Taiwan, there's always so much to eat, but even more better conversations that flow through the meals. And last night at dinner, we were talking about blended finance is one corner of the sustainable investing and that broader conversation. But I think few people truly understand what it is and all of that. And maybe just starting back to Caroline, right? Giving a bit more flavor. You gave some frameworks about how the audience could think about blended finance, and perhaps you could cite some examples of, how would that work out for them to better visualize as we can flow that conversation through.
Thank you. That question, and maybe I should bring my slides back up. So the blending is really the key is you blend together philanthropic funding together with development funding. Think about, for example, the Asian Development Bank, IFC, the World Bank, etc. And those help subsidize and de-risk private capital investments. So basically, they help improve the risk-return ratio through these different risk mitigation mechanisms I mentioned. For example, by providing technical assistance to the local communities, to the local farmers, by providing first loss guarantee that's ex post, correct? And so this helps improve the risk-return ratio for different investors to come in. It's not about changing preferences. It's not about changing objectives of each kind of investor. But it's rather really about thinking collectively, how can we work together to structure a deal that makes sense for each party involved. Now, I'm not surprised at all to see that there were very few hands going up, and I appreciate your honesty that you didn't just raise your hand. And, shocking is, when you look at education, so not to play up the role of academia here, but when you look at education, there's maybe a handful of schools worldwide that would have a single course on blended finance. Finance scholars do not know what blended finance is. There is practically no research out there. There's one paper that is mine. But scholars have not looked at blended finance. Nobody teaches blended finance, the collaboration of investors for achieving good, correct? And so this is a very new way of thinking. How can different types of investors work together to achieve a common goal? Well, maybe they have different goals, but to achieve their own goals, as you mentioned before, correct? So we need to better, but for this, to achieve this, we need dialogue, and we need a way much better understanding of each other's preferences, objectives, limitations, legal restrictions, and then have that conversation about how can we put together the puzzle. We are far away from really having a good understanding how to effectively structure those deals, but there are many, many examples out there, case studies, that where these deals have been successful. So you asked me, I have still not answered your question, correct?
Yeah. You have. And I do want to come to May, right? Because of course she speaks to many clients about these type of opportunities. And before that, it also comes to my mind, like I'm Singaporean, but I was saying a few years ago, I had decided I was going to volunteer to go to Indonesia and do a stint onshore. So I went by myself, no Indonesian blood, cannot speak a word of Bahasa Indonesia, and ended up living there for 3.5 years. But one of the things that came up, and I think in Pak Frankie's earlier video, it also came, was this concept of gotong royong. Indonesia has this concept of the community coming together. And I thought in my Singaporean mind, originally, I thought it should be 5 people means everybody should equally share, means 20% of everyone. But the Indonesian friends introduced to me, that is not how it works. And I kind of feel it's a little bit like blended finance. You know, they felt that if you are stronger, you should contribute 40%. And the one who is weaker but still has willingness can contribute 5%, but together everyone has that same spirit to achieve, you know, that overall objective, and that is how the community comes together, right? And I think with that, right, coming to May, and we talked about, you know, all the different kind of investors that come through Singapore, and many of them are not Singaporean in the first place, right? Would you have an example of a story perhaps that you could share in a conversation regarding this?
Why don't I stay with Indonesia? So when we advise clients, it's definitely from the entrepreneur point of view. They are both investors, but they are also powerful enablers. So if you look at electricity, that's a tough one, right? In Indonesia, there's a lot of coal-fired plants. A lot of generational wealth has been, you know, made from coal plants. A lot of coal plants are being retrofitted so that they can still operate, but they are now renewable, clean energy. So the clients who own coal plants, they do that best. They are business people, right? But how can a blended finance model come in, for example? Where the plants are, there are also a lot of rural villages sometimes, right? And a lot of people in these rural villages they're not part of the electric grid. Okay, so the government might say this is a problem we want to fix. You have an entrepreneur who's extremely, you know, successful. You might have an NGO or a development bank or someone that wants to fix the problem. The people who want to fix the problem don't have the means to know how to deal with it, technical, engineering, structural issues, right? And they don't have the money. The entrepreneur might have the money and may be very interested because the for-profit model is great, but the entrepreneur might say, yes, now carbon, you know, things like that, you know, we want to be sustainable. I would want to also look at another area of business, more like a social enterprise maybe. Then the state comes in and says, I like this. This dialogue sounds good. What I can do is provide some incentive, right? We have a plan to really, you know, try to electrify or try to provide electricity for these rural environment, rural villages, you know, and whatever model they decide on is very, very powerful because it's hyper-local. It is a solution that makes sense when it's not only for the people living in the village, by the people who are in there, but it's really an extension of that corporate or business know-how, right? So the government comes in and provides first loss capital. Inspiring and I guess, almost providing a sense of reassurance for the big investor, which is the energy company, but also other private investors like yourself. So that is what we mean by blended. There are many examples, but this is a simple way to understand the power of that to solve a problem, but there also will be for-profit, aspects as well as non-profit.
Thank you for that, May. And I want to go to Vincent, right? And let's go to that. Earlier in the day, there was a discussion about the huge funding gap that we need. And, many of us would say there's so much private capital, so much private wealth. And in fact, during COVID, many of the public institutions, they were busy and all of that. But the private institutions, so many of my clients sat on lots of liquidity waiting to deploy. But coming from your perspective as an angel investor and as aggregator of many friends, right, as we all know for Vincent, how do you think we could convince many of these private wealth owners to do more in this space? And what could be done differently to bring them together?
Sure. I think the previous speaker mentioned the same rules. They must have a system to let everybody plug and play. When things come out, if you're not ready, it's too late. You cannot wait for that. So what's the system is? The first thing is, I think that everything is start from our heart. So the people comes, people matters. So the family is the basic foundation to grow up the people, the most close people. So family office should play the role as an opinion leader. You can imagine, in Asia only, the asset under management by family office is 27 trillion US dollar. And the next 5 years is about 5.8 trillion will be transferred to next generation. So all these assets, so with this heart, because the family want to create a legacy, the family want to well educate the next generation want to outperform, to prove they can do something to their father, to their mother. So this is a great timing to utilize this kind of energy. But most important thing is the system, the structure. What the structure is? I say a structure encourages behavior. If you don't have a structure, the behavior won't dry up. So this is a fundamental awareness. So all of us should go in I call the Trinity model, is how to create awareness through the education, through this kind of conference, to learn more or reading or visit all the university around the world. I personally visit all the university around the world to learn from them. MIT, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, of course, Columbia. This is my final destiny. So that's the way to create awareness, and then you have to build your tie with the community. So that's the consensus from the community, like Tzu Chi, the community, like any kind of association, the good economic association in Hong Kong, everywhere, they have the similar people with a great heart, want to outperform. So once you have this kind of preparation, and then you get into action. So even work with the school, like Columbia, they're especially under the Caroline's direction. So there's a sustainable research initiative, sustainable investment research initiative just coming up. So all the school, including business school, law school, engineering school, all of them work together. So Oxford have the similar concept. We have a different kind of college. I belong to Lincoln College. Our college is going to 600 years. So within the college just like a sector, protect us, protect the young generation to try, not afraid to fail, to learn from the senior through the tutorial models. Tutorial model, what that means is a mentorship model. The 大道城 I just mentioned is mentorship model. So if you visit 大道城, sometime you will see maybe one of us will draw out the bench and we just like a soapbox conversation and we talk. And a group of people just surrounding in front of the temple on the street. And we talk, we share, we perform. The purpose of that is one to transfer the wisdom from older generation to young generation. What's the purpose of that? Enlarge our mental model. If your mental model is strengthened enough, you can resist the evil attraction. You can insist to do something good. And when you follow that trick, you can convince others. All this family, business family owner, entrepreneur, regional owner, to deploy their capital. So the VC previously is a venture capital, but now the VC is a visionary capital. It's from ego-central, Wall Street guy, people don't like them, to an eco-central, care about the environment. If we have that kind of training within your heart, from awareness to community to action, and create a reinforced loop, and all this capital will follow through and direct to the right place.
Thank you, Vincent. I guess one of the takeaways is that we should have more soapbox storytelling, right, in public areas and, amplified with social media, live telecasts and all that Tzu Chi also does. As part of that, May and I, we were speaking, as we were meeting, right, talking about succession and talking about the opportunities. And I think many of us have also seen that it's going beyond family business and family office now. There's a lot about family capital. For many of the families who are also taking a step back and becoming responsible owners with shareholders and living professional management, what is it that holds the family together? It's also about the values. It's also about the opportunity to do something good, to do something that kind of works and will be able to be part of that identity, right? What do you see are some of the opportunities and challenges with regards to that, right? And where do you think, we are going to go the next couple of years?
I'm sure you can imagine that in the banking industry, and of course PwC very much part of that, a lot of conversations about the wealth transfer. We have people who were born in the 40s, 50s, 60s, or sometimes a bit earlier, who are passing, trillions, to the next generation, and everybody's worried about that, right? And when you look at multi-generational families who are, second gen, third gen in the business, it's getting more difficult. Why? Because we always tell the clients, you cannot be equal, impossible, but you can try and be fair. Why? Because if I have 3 kids and you have 3 kids and everybody has 2 or 3 or 4 kids and we're all part of a family, we're all siblings, second gen, right? It doesn't mean that the family should divide everything by 4 and then by the number of grandchildren. It's very difficult because the people who are in the business want to keep the money in there because they want to grow the business. The people who are not in the business says, please give me the money, I'm in film school, I'm going to be a movie producer, right? So we see that all the time. So one way to do it is to approach the family money, portfolio education, allocation is a banking term, right? You have $100, we're going to invest it for you. $5, a little bit more risky, $5 maybe a bit more safe investments. We use philanthropy as a safe way to bring the family to some kind of resolution, some kind of agreement, some kind of peace, where you can say that, older generation, they prefer more traditional giving. Tzu Chi does great work. When you give money to Tzu Chi, I hope you write a blank check and leave it there, because they know how to do the work best. But the younger generation might say, I want to be a lot more involved, and I don't want to just give to Taiwan, I want to give to somewhere else. Maybe when they went to school, or they are very strong advocates, maybe they wanted to help like in the Ukraine and things like that. So the family, often we become the family advisors, will work portfolio allocation aspect. 70% is spent by the people who made the money. 30% is given to the younger generation to try innovative solutions like blended finance, like different things. And we see that that's a model that's more and more preferred. And when clients listen to this, a lot of them go home and think about it and talk about it. And it's a way to also bring their kids who are very well educated in the schools that you teach at and into the conversation. And they come back and tell me, I'm surprised at how energetic my kids became when we asked them to tell us about what they see in some of these places in the UK, in the US, in Australia and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there is that Chinese saying, right? 富不过三代. And sometimes as a tax advisor, I have families who come to me and say, 富不过三代 because estate duty is 50%, and then I divide, that's it, right? But it's also about not just, taxes is a big part of it, right? It's part of my job, but it is also about how you pass that message along, that value to be entrepreneurial, continuing to give each of their next gen a space to try, right? And create their own identity as they come through. But Caroline, as you come through the school and you go so many places around the world, right? Speak at conferences and all that. What kind of messages and concerns are family officers speaking to you about, or confusion for that matter? What are you hearing from them actually that we could take away?
I'm not sure it's specific to family officers, okay? But I think many aim to do good, many aim to think longer term, family office specifically, correct, intergenerational wealth management. But the question is how? And my sense is they don't often get a holistic answer to this. And I think a challenge is that very often we take on a firm level or portfolio level view, but we do not see it holistically. So very often we don't see all the different types of capital, for example, a family office has, and do exactly that portfolio. I should not use the term portfolio in this case, but in a sense of how can you meaningfully invest in different ways, but you look at it as holistically, correct? And not just here's our foundation, here's our investment, and here's whatever else. And most folks would look at it separately. And I think much more impact can be achieved. Impact in the sense of whatever the objective is of the family office, if they actually really look at it across all capital, but also across generations.
Thanks for that, right, Caroline? And I guess coming back to Vincent, right, blended finance is a pretty big kind of concept. We're often talking about projects that not one party can kind of finance together. And I wonder whether people in public may also feel that this is the domain of the ultra high, of only institutional investors, of government players and all of that. But, for Tzu Chi has that concept, right, of the bamboo bank, every day a little drop as we drop through. How about retail folks like us? How do you think, Vincent, we could play a role, right, in that whole blended finance, sustainable investment conversations? And where could every one of us kind of start?
Yes. Carol, I just mentioned the total portfolio concept. So that's why I think. So impact asset is just one of the asset class. So if we deploy the modern portfolio theory, put this way, the first thing I have to examine is the risk return. And the second thing I have to examine is the correlation between the different kind of asset. So when I construct a total portfolio, there's a public asset and a private asset. So most of us, to mention the impact investment, people think about this, there's a private equity investment, there's a venture investment. But if you from the asset owner point of view or family owner point of view, so our view is holistic. I want to become a whole person. So everything, every reaction, every asset, every planet is into impact. But there's a different way to do. Private investment, a direct investment, a venture, there's a different tool to do it. But when I put all together, I have a way to measure, to allocate each kind of the asset. And also, usually, family office will have the three basic entities. So one is a foundation, one is their original business, operating business. The third one will be their venture, the venture for major impact. So the most important impact and the common people or common investor, the way is not different from the traditional investing. They pick out the opportunity. They believe they will shine. But the most important thing is if you want to make an impact at scale, as you say, and it's not about the size of the money. It's about what kind of the ingredient you get it. For example, life science. Most of our life science save people life. Last time I mentioned penicillin, invented by Oxford, purified, scaled by Oxford, saved millions of people's lives during the World War II. Recent experience, COVID, Oxford Vaccine Tech, this company is a spin-off from Oxford. They save the millions of lives, prevent 140 million from death. So that's the impact at scale. But if in terms of the size of at the first beginning to put in the theoretical capital into it, how much you think? Not too much. Just 1 million, 100,000. I just tell you a story. The Pfizer, they have their vaccine. The one company from China get the license, exclusive license to distribute the vaccine, right? Do you know how much they invest? Because they don't know the COVID will come in. How much they invest to get this technology? Just $20 million. You can imagine how much money we cost us to buy this machine? It's billions. So if you cover earlier, like investment, you cover earlier, cover high, cover deep. You go to the deep technology, you go to life science, go to the healthcare. All this impact investment have impact at scale. So that's why I'm saying my professor from Oxford, now he's the director of the Marshall Institute, LSE, Stephen Chambers, he said, the commercial saying about the unicorn is in one company have the value, financial value, $1 billion. But his impact thinking is we should create some organization or encourage or support the organization can sell, can have sell millions of life, billions of life, or make this kind of the billions peoples with happiness. Save people from the world. How to deploy technology, how to design the policy, for example. How to work with academia, for example, to they then do the best of their job. So if we can utilize our philanthropy money, our corporate operating to become a good economic company, and also our venture to target all this very critical science, even like recent AI, how to apply the AI to make a whole efficiency, but at the same time to care about the energy consumption. So that's the way we should participate.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. And I think while it is opportunities for us to come in earlier for capital. You know, not all of us may say this is the capital that we may have, but I think just like the Tzu Chi philosophy, right? Every volunteer has an opportunity to do something different. You could contribute to, you know, being in the field, being in the industry, I think being part of conversations, and those are all very, very useful. And as part of that, right, since we are talking about being inclusive, I wanted to check whether anybody in the audience might have a question coming through, whether there's any comments, please. Do we have a microphone? If we could provide a microphone? Or
Thank you. My name is Cliff from Hong Kong. And Vincent, I promise I won't start singing. I raised half hand. I was confident in raising half hand because after listening to Jeff and Caroline and Vincent this afternoon, I thought I grabbed some of the ideas. I wanted to make a couple of comments. And first of all, maybe to Mate's comments regarding ESG versus 善经济, economy of goodness. I always felt that, as you said, ESG is something that you feel pressured to do it. And that's actually true. I mean, to me, ESG is more like a compliance, while economy of goodness is really from the heart. You really want to do it. So you integrate that into your business plan, your business model, your human resources strategy, and all that. So I thought that's actually perhaps a good way to distinguish the two concepts. And because a lot of people actually raise that question. So, economy of goodness is ESG. It's actually not, right? I promise that I'll work hard enough to be able to come to you and open an account. And before that, I'll have a couple of questions for our friends from the Little Red Dot. I'm from Hong Kong, right? So rest assured the questions are friendly. Really, I had the experience of, a very good friend of mine came to Hong Kong after starting the European Venture Philanthropy Network in Europe. Doug Miller, some of you may know him. And he came to Hong Kong and said, hey, Cliff, we want to start an AVPN, Asia Venture Philanthropy Network. And of course, he was talking to people in Hong Kong and Singapore. Somehow, Hong Kong is always slow on these things. He chose Singapore because he got a lot of support from Singapore government. And this is where I want to ask the question. We talked about blended finance this afternoon. Of course, the key elements are, key element is the catalytic capital. The government, the philanthropies, and perhaps some impact investors, low return capital. Now, I want to maybe, perhaps, hopefully, when we go back, we can think more about it and think more about how Hong Kong can do more about it. But I really want to get advice and your sharing of experience of what's happening in Singapore in terms of government and philanthropic capital supporting blended finance, or are there any statistics showing how much money are they actually putting into this new way of doing things? And you earlier, Kirsten, talked about more than 1,600 family offices having set up in Singapore now. Are they getting involved in supporting blended finance? So just want to hear your experience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cliff. Maybe I start and then I can pass the mic to May, right, to share. So I think first, Singapore and Hong Kong, we always consider ourselves friends. I'm going up to eat dim sum as well, very soon after Taipei, right? There are many, many, I think, complementary opportunities to grow as we grow the whole APAC and global market. But I think Singapore's strategy towards this is starting to sharpen. At the beginning, it was very much about just attracting a certain volume into Singapore so that we get a certain economies of scale. And I think compared to, for example, not just Hong Kong, but like New York, London, etc., we were slightly behind on the financial center kind of scale. But there was a huge wave that came through. We said the numbers flipped 5 times, in some of statistics. And there clearly isn't 5 times the number of consultants or bankers in the market. We were all going crazy at that point in time. But as they filter through, I think what the Singapore government is kind of taking the lead alongside philanthropists, families, stakeholders, ecosystem players, it is that it is trying to take a very all-in type of approach. So I give you an example, right? Many of the families also come because of taxation certainty. We offer tax incentives and all that for the family funds so that if you manage from Singapore, I can give you 0% corporate income tax on qualifying investment gains from investment products, yeah? But you don't have to go to Cayman and all of that. Come, bring your management to Singapore, hire locally, have an economic spin-off. That is the strategy. But as part of that, when they are doing the application approvals, they will tell every single family office, we also have philanthropic initiatives. Would you like to join our mailing list? Can you join our ecosystem? And they treat it as a joint kind of approach. So the central bank and the Economic Development Board has a joint family office, work group that comes through. So they are looking at where is it that you deploy. I'm speaking to the same principle, but they may not always deploy through the family office. Coming back to Winston's point, right, that they have different levers. They may decide this makes more sense through the business. That makes more sense through, capital or private names and all of that. So there is a concerted thinking to say, how would I learn together? Where do I bring many of these philanthropists or emerging thinkers to come and learn? Not just necessarily have to do right at the beginning. So I think that is starting to take some momentum. I think the other thing that we observe is that many of the families are now talking about it, but not all of them are actually deploying, or they are at least deploying through funds, but not necessarily direct. Because it is not so easy to find measurable, sustainable, risk-adjusted kind of investments, and then convince. Sometimes it's the current gen that are very convinced. Sometimes it's the next gens, but the ones who have the interest don't necessarily have the wallet as well in the family. So there are many situations like that, but I think the third thing that Singapore is looking to do, and I think that is something that the Singapore government is leading the way, is that it is putting hard money into this. So like we were saying at COP29, the central bank announced, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, that it would commit $500 million to match concessionary, right? Blended finance. So if you were someone who is already an early starter and think, I will put 5 million, why not do it through Singapore because I can make it 10 at the start? So it's things like that that I think they are trying to put more weight behind that. And it is still an emerging journey even for us, but we are starting to see, I think, more and more conversations. Yeah, maybe May.
Thank you. The Singapore government, we are called Singapore Inc. Singapore is run like a big company, right? And the government is clever. They are opportunistic. And it's interesting because if you have a family office in Singapore, as of July 5th last year, they announced a slew of tax incentives, as Kasin said. For the first time, if you have a family office and you satisfy a few conditions, you can donate money to any charity worldwide and get 100% tax deduction in Singapore. That's crazy. That's unheard of. So if you give, $10,000 to some charity in Indonesia, right? I get 10,000, 10,000 off my tax, assessment. On top of that, they give 100% tax deduct on blended finance investments. That's, Cliff just said wow to me, right? I say wow too. You know why I say wow? Because July 5th, the scheme was launched. I was just on a call with MAS. Can I just maybe boast a little bit to tell you that, BNP CEO, Arnaud Tellier, is the chairman of MAS's philanthropy work group that deals with that. That means I have a really tough job, to support my CEO. But, so I talk to MAS often and I asked, we have a lot of clients who are interested, right? I want to ask more about the scheme Because to qualify, you have to make sure that your blended finance, your investment is validated. Now, the validation part is hard, right? Because MAS says it will be validated by people like them, accounting firms or law firms. The accounting firms and law firms says, I don't know really how to validate a blended finance structure. So believe it or not, no one yet has benefited from the 100% tax deduction, but I'm sure it will come. I like the ambition, but the honest to God truth is that we're all still trying to figure it out. So half a hand, in a room, couple of half a hands, absolutely honest, absolutely right now. Hong Kong is amazing because Hong Kong is so much more advanced in social enterprises than Singapore. Why do I say that? I say that because there's not enough deal flow. We talk about there's not enough deal flow, because a lot of the blended finance opportunities may be too small for banks to onboard. A lot of the funders are our clients, right? So somewhere, somehow, we need to fix that. And it's really to get a lot of these social enterprises ready for market, fit for market. I think Hong Kong has a great chance to do so. And HKMA is not lying back. HKMA is incredibly, in March this year, there were 3 huge conferences. 2 are brand new, and it was all about philanthropy and things like that. So Singapore and Hong Kong are friendly, but we're also a little bit competitive. And that's fantastic because we are going to, inspire each other to do more. Yeah. There was a gentleman in the back first. Yeah, I think there's a gentleman, we'll come back to you. We'll definitely come back to you.
Well, thank you, Vincent and Caroline and all these distinguished speakers. I'm not a financial guy, and I'm mainly from the media and philanthropy now as a scholar and advocate the economic goodness. And look at this common goodness. So I want to suggest, from the metaphor side, which is a unicorn, is like a very, very isolated, very unique. But we have to change the metaphor because common good brand finance indicate that we have to collaborate from different professions. Banker, philanthropist, scholar, all join together. So I propose penguin. Penguin, when the winter comes, when the snowstorm hit, the earth, the penguin, thousands of them gather together to resist this kind of storm. So penguins is cute, right? They are so benign. They are so kind. Unicorn like a horn, like a very, very mean. So we have to change the metaphor first because as Lawrence here, Lawrence is not here. Lawrence says telling a good story. So is Cliff. He's the chairman of this Economic Goodness Society in Hong Kong. We're telling a good story. So as I talked to Caroline at this lunch, we said about if Siri from Colombia build a platform, you're able to invite philanthropists and bankers and also a different kind of initiator. They have new idea to solve the crisis or environment or poverty or inequality. And that kind of experimental collaboration, sharing the idea, design the model, and implement that. Implementation is very important because they don't want to see only, they want result, not only, ideal. So the outcome is very important. As Jeb suggests that the outcome-based financing. So I think this is about the time to build a platform and to, conjoin different kind of expertise. So as Vincent advocated that kind of idea, sinful, I want to change the S from the systematic to san. S-H-A-N, change to san. Why? San is a goodness, right, in Chinese. So I think it's just about time we approach the common good and commonwealth. So metaphor change first, not unicorn, but penguin. Thank you so much.
I think we have, sir, would you want to bring the mic over to him? Thank you,
I'm really sorry.
Can we just have that one gentleman?
One more? Okay, one more person.
The microphone?
Really, thank you. I really appreciate all the information that you folks have. My name is Gary. I used to grow up in the States. And recently, well, I've been involved in carbon trading since 2008. At the time, we have an office in Singapore. Anyway, my quick question is that because I'm involved in climate change, so also got involved in family capital, I just come to realize Singapore is a global family capital center. One problem I have come across is that because there's a sufficient funding available from all this family capital, I see a good engagement between family capital and also the Tzu Chi Foundation, because quite often we run into all the scam, all different company and this and that. Since Singapore is such a global center, is there a bulletin or data center that can have all the people come to check, oh, is this project okay, or is that project okay? I think people really taking advantage of being the goodness. So that's a quick question. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Your suggestion of a platform or an aggregator is fantastic. In fact, I hope that all the countries, in and around Asia can help, because my job will be a lot easier. In Singapore, we do have a very transparent program, but it's only for charities. So there are over almost 3,000 charities in Singapore, but only 700 are IPC charities, Institute of Public Character. To be one of them, if you are one of them, it's very tough because of the incredible regulations. If you are an IPC, you can give 250% tax exemption. That's huge. I run an IPC charity. I'm actually a lot skinnier and younger, but because of that, I'm a lot older and fatter now, right? It's overwhelming, the regulation, but it's a really good thing, because when you go online, you can see the charity's financials, the annual report, everybody's pay, all the directors, and that's fantastic, because goodness is also about being accountable. Unfortunately, though, we don't have the same thing when it comes to, sort of better financial opportunities and things like that. Cliff, you brought up AVPN. AVPN is attempting something like this, with an incredible connect kind of platform where you can go online and you can look at basically what investment opportunities there are, whether it's pure donation or all the way on that continuum to impact investing. In fact, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, funded the expansion of AVPN's platform, and hopefully over time there'll be more to come. But certainly Singapore is trying to be the catalyst for this type of reporting, this type of aggregation, and I can't wait for more of that. But to your good point, we need definitely more of that. Yeah.
So I fully agree with you that data is fundamentally important, and providing such a platform, correct? As we all know, investors, be it philanthropies, be it big investors, we don't like the lack of transparency. We don't like information asymmetry. If there is a lack of transparency, the expected risk return, it's unfavorable for the risk return ratio, basically. So we would expect a higher return to make up for that higher risk or perceived risk. And this is particularly severe for or even more severe for basically countries in the global south, where we may not have ESG disclosure requirements, etc. I mean, most countries around the world do not have ESG disclosure requirements, correct? All that stuff. So all to say, if we find ways to improve transparency, it would help tremendously to make these deals more attractive for more investors to come in and invest. And so AVPN would be a potential. Then there is also convergence. They provide information about who are the players, where do they invest in, and in what type of projects. It's kind of like a Facebook of blended finance. But what we in addition need, I think we need to take a step further. We need to have information about investable projects, about expected returns, financial returns, non-financial returns, risk, etc. But also who are the players and what are their preferences and what are their, for example, willingness for concessionality, correct? So making progress on this is, I think, a key element, fundamentally important, and this is also where we are very much interested in helping to contribute.
Thank you, everyone. Please give me a round of applause to our lovely speakers. Thank you. I'm Vincent Sen. Actually, my name could be San, right? San, right? Vincent Shen, Vincent San. I hope to see you next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists and Vincent for moderating. So please stand up to the stage in front and we'll take a photo. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so our special guests who need to return back to the hotel, the bus is already waiting outside. So for those of you who are catching the bus, please follow our volunteers. 那等一下，请大家先留步一下哈。
We would like to invite everyone to stay for this important message because we are already late by 20 minutes. Other people are already waiting to board the shuttle bus. But for those of you who want to stay for dinner, no one, then we would like to remind you to please go to the shuttle bus as soon as possible. Thank you.